good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Hi, and welcome to the CTO Roundtables. We are finally back in 2023. My name is Marek, and I'm really excited to be your host today. I even am sitting at the round table at the moment. I can show you around. So we have a round table, but it's empty at the moment because everybody works remotely, especially in IT. Everyone works in the cloud, and the cloud is actually the topic that we will discuss today. The topic is kind of complex, and it's about complexity. So it's 2022, navigating the cloud development complexity ahead. Over the last years, I think that the cloud make a significant change in how the software development works, and make lots of progress from being just a service that allows you to add more RAM kind of quickly to your server, or maybe use an infinite disk space, into something like serverless architecture, distributed databases, queues, containerization, and all in all, it starts to be more and more complex. And so today I would like to discuss with my wonderful guests about what's really so complex, if it is really complex, and how to unwrap it. So today we have invited Ruben von Smel, CTO at Expate. Hi, Ruben.
Hi.
Something about you?
I'm passionate about cloud. I actually probably cloud native myself. I mean, I fell into IT through cloud, so this is something that always excites me to think about, to talk about, and mainly how it relates to people and how people think and build stuff. So yeah, today brilliant topic to be part of, and well, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thank you for accepting our invitation. And Adam, VP of Engineering at the Software House. Hi, Adam.
Hi, Marek. Hey, everyone. So same as Ruben, I'm also the, let's say, cloud passionate. However, what I'm also responsible for is basically helping the customers, the people to understand it. And this actually comes down to the, let's say, tackling this complexity of the cloud, helping them to understand, navigate through different areas. So I'm happy to and excited to actually be here to share all of my experience with you guys.
Yep. And we have Wojtek Dąbrowski, Head of Cloud Architecture at DTIQ. So the title is pretty explanatory, but do you want to add something?
Yes. Hi, Marek. Hello, guys. I'm glad to be with you. And it's not a surprise that I am also a cloud enthusiast. But also I'm a fan of DevOps culture, so I think we will discuss some about it today also. And I'm building the cloud team inside the DTIQ. So we are not the service company, but we have our products, and we are developing the cloud for our clients, not the end clients.
Great. And I'm Marek Gajda. I'm the CTO at the Software House. As I said, I will be the host. That means that I will try to keep time of this discussion. So it's planned to be 1 hour long. So let's see how it goes. We also have a chat window here at the bottom. If you see, there is a chat icon, and there is a questions and answers tab. Where you can please free to ask any questions, and I will try to pass them through to our guests. Also, please just if you want to have a discussion in the chat, you're more than welcome. We'll be looking at the chat from time to time, and maybe it will inspire us in our conversation. Just one little quirk on the Zoom is if you see the chat, there's a drop down where you select to whom the message should go through, and you should select everyone, because by default this is only for me. So this is kind of strange. So please do. Oh, I even see the first question here. Yes, will this recording be shared? Yes, this is exactly what I wanted to say next. Yes, this all is recorded, and it will be shared later on. So for further use, it will be shared. Okay, so I think it's all about the logistics. And before we start the discussion, a little bit of disclaimer first. So we have talked with our guests before, and we decided that we don't want to go in much of a detail about each of the cloud providers, because I know that there are more of them, and it also comes to a little details about the differences, but I don't want this discussion to be about the differences between the cloud providers and what's good, what's bad. Actually, this is a nice topic maybe for the next time to discuss which cloud provider to choose. But for this one, we would rather focus on the cloud complexity in general. So there are more or less the same patterns in all of the cloud platforms that are there, but we have to focus on one to give you some examples. So it happens that all of us feel the most comfortable with AWS. So the examples you might expect would rather be on AWS, but I think the same patterns can be easily transferred to any other platform. And I will try to keep it as generic as possible technically, so you can make most of it. And by the way, the software house as well became just recently AWS advanced partner, so it is even good. Yeah, we celebrated a lot. This is the moment when we can actually have the this nice little logo here, AWS partner advanced tier services, so we can brag about it, so we can see this logo from time to time. So this but this is not sponsored by AWS, by the way. It's just that we'll make most of the examples probably on AWS. Okay, so let's start the discussion. I maybe stop sharing the screen for a moment so you can see our faces. Okay, so I am kind of confused sometimes, because if I look at the websites of the cloud providers, it says like this is self-managed and super easy, right? And setting up a project is no problem at all, barely an inconvenience, right? And something like this. And on the other hand, I hear that whoa, this is so complex that setting up an environment in cloud becomes a project on its own. And so what's the truth? How does it look like, and what's so complex in the cloud? Adam, do you think that you can answer this question?
I think so, at least from my point of view. So I'd say cloud is actually easy to get to. Yeah, like it's easy to start. Yeah, you need like a few, probably even a seconds or minutes maximum to set up account, create the instance of like EC2 or anything on any provider, and basically you are done. Or I mean, this is the simplest version of it. But for me, for example, what was for me, for our customers, what is important at some point is like this complexity lies in different areas. Yeah, for example, the pricing can be confusing. Yeah, the actual usage, some of the limitations of the specific cloud could be also hard to grasp. Yeah, at the very start, you are not aware of that. You don't know that, there is a limit of services or like instances you can have, the maximum limit. And if you want to increase it, you have to know about that and how to do that. There are like soft limits, hard limits, and somehow you have to, navigate through it. Yeah. And for the newcomer, it's like, whoa, the cloud is cool because I'm able to click through the things. I'm able to set, a good environment. Yeah. Then, there is even more challenging part. Yeah. Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when, everything, let's say, started, we had only a few services available. Yeah. So it was easy to, let's say, master those few services because, yeah, like, I don't know, it was like 20, 30. Nowadays, each provider has like hundreds of different services. And every year on conferences like, reInvent, like Ignite, and I think Google Cloud Next, we are introduced to new services that we have to master, and yet we also have improvement to the existing services or quite crucial changes. Yeah, so I think this might make it complex for many people. Yeah, to fully understand and utilize the cloud at the end.
Yeah. Ruben, what do you think? It's like, what's the biggest challenge here?
So for me, the interesting part is it's easy to start a pet project, right? And just because we're nerds, at least I'll talk for myself, on your spare time, you try something, and indeed in 5 minutes, I have a piece of software running and it does something. So, well, that qualifies as super, super easy. On the other hand, what is not our spare time, we're building, let's say, more enterprise level software. And now suddenly that's where that complexity comes in, because if I only have to look through the very, very little scope of does it run? Well, I pick 1 or 2 services in Amazon, in Google Cloud, in Azure, and I can make it run. But then how can I prove that it's secure? How can I make sure it's scalable and so on? And once you start putting all those functional and non-functional requirements around the software where you have the number of dimensions you start dealing with and this number of options to respond to those, now suddenly you're talking, okay, I actually need a cloud architect, or I need somebody with profound knowledge of that to do the best possible job in order to, well, make every stakeholder in an enterprise-like organization happy. If my compliance officer comes to me and say, well, by the way, do I have all audit traces somewhere? Well, my pet project didn't have that. Of course it didn't. Why would it? And why would I even pay for it? But then how do I do that? Now there are 20 different ways to do it, and most of them are okay. Even if I ask my cloud provider, I read white papers, I read opinions of different people, and there are different ones, and they're all good to some extent. That's where guidance on well, what is a good architecture, right, comes in, and they tell you, well, you should think about these 5, 6 things. Well, I can. And then again, I still can create 6, 7, 10 different ways of still responding to that request and that expectations. And all those different stakeholders will basically influence what I build using those thousands of services and those millions of features in those services. Yeah, and that's a forest. And walking that forest, it becomes very, very complex. So it really depends on what is your need and where are you? I'm building an MVP. I just want to know if I can make it work. If it crashes, or I have this thing, it is not allowed to die. That's for me where complexity comes in. But you're looking at different people also that then are needed to build that, to understand that, and so on.
Yep, it's you probably don't know, but I come from a game development environment, and there was this saying in the game development that the good game should be easy to learn but hard to master.
Yes.
And
what I hear, right?
Is like you're talking about it. And Wojtek, what do you think about it?
I think the biggest problem and the biggest challenge in cloud development is that we have to think about different things when you want to compare to traditional model, so-called traditional model. So we, as an engineers, software engineers and software architects, we haven't faced some types of problems before, and those types of problems are very different. The other thing is that we cannot forget that cloud services and cloud at all is not complicated, I think. And the managed services in cloud reduces complexity of our solutions, actually. And our responsibility is to use them responsibly. So to design the architecture in the responsible way, so we can improve that and develop further.
Yep. Okay. So I also did a small research. Asked my clients about the challenges and obviously did some internet search. I also found this pretty nice report by Flexera, State of Cloud 2022. You can find it over the internet, it's public. And there was this one diagram, top cloud initiatives for organizations. And it pretty much aligns with what I have heard from my clients, is that the #1 topic is cost optimization. You also mentioned this. And apart from that, the number 5 is better financial reporting on cloud costs. Because what is really interesting is that, first of all, you might have a big bill, but the second, you don't even know what the bill will be. Because this is in this pay-as-you-go model, which seems pretty nice at the moment you buy it, but then you realize that you actually don't know how much you will pay. Ruben, do you share the same thoughts about the cost optimization, or this is predictable, unpredictable, or?
Definitely, there is an element of unpredictability if not done well. So it takes work, it takes effort. Where before, basically, your constraint was also your cost control. I have just this much bandwidth. I just have this much servers running. Well, this is what I paid for, right? So the worst that can happen is I don't have enough of it anymore, but I know what I paid. Right now I can have infinite, and I will pay for infinite if I get infinite. So there are choices to be made at that point. So, okay, is infinite really what I want, what I need? And if you say yes to that, am I willing to pay when something causes infrastructure to go infinite? Of course, it's not really infinite, but it comes damn close to infinite, and my budget is not infinite. So there is always something there, right? But then in the models of the different cloud providers, there is ways to get a grip on that. And it means that from design on, you need to start thinking about, how do I keep control? How do I understand what's happening? How do I know what's going to be next? Some allow you to stop things based on, well, what is going to cost? Some say, well, no, it's going to cost you. The only thing you can do is receive an alarm, wake up, and turn something off if you really don't like it. At least what I like to do is, in the design of a service, already have the thought of, how will I know what it costs? So looking ahead before I build it, but that's still, well, fuzzy, right? But then also building in the tool. If I deploy something, it also has a monitor on that. It tells me, for that microservice, this is the current level of cost. There's an alarm if it goes this much more. And you don't want to have to do that again and again, which means if I abstract a little piece of infrastructure, that abstraction also contains the monitor itself. Now deploy again a database, it deploys together with its own monitor. It will always ping. There is not a database without a ping. Now, if you start thinking that way, you get a certain level of control. If you do it badly, you get pinged all the time and you don't know anything. But there is a way to keep, let's say, in charge of this. Of course, there are things that you didn't expect, that you didn't think of, that will go terribly wrong. Remember, everybody has these examples, right? I don't know, a resource that keeps rebooting, and every time it boots, you get billed $100, and the next day you already burned 10K before you even woke up. It happens. But in general, instrumenting it from the start, having visibility, but also having alerting in there, means I'm not at the mercy anymore of the infrastructure doing weird things. but it's a learning curve. I notice also that as time goes, we get better at it. We get more tools to deal with. We're getting provided more handles.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right with this. And I also heard a couple of those stories. So I'm wondering if this is like an urban legend or not, that there was this guy and he did something wrong, and overnight he woke up in the morning with a huge bill on on the cloud.
You don't
and
even need to sleep on it. My first steps on the cloud, really honestly, I burned through the whole free tier of Lambdas. And the most stupid thing, and nowadays you have a little checkbox, I think, in their UI that says, I'm aware that I shouldn't create infinite loops on S3 Lambda, S3 Lambda, S3 Lambda. They added the check mark, and I was so grateful, because my first step in Amazon, I burned through free tier in 5 minutes. I hit the API limit. That's why I didn't start paying more. But yes, it is that simple, right? You just forget something and it's gone.
And you know what you said. So I think most of us developers actually did such a thing. Like the very first time we stepped into a cloud, we probably burned a lot of money of our own because of a stupid mistake. Yeah, and this is what I said. This is why I said it can be complex to understand or hard to understand, because there are some quirks that we are not aware until we actually reach this level, or like have this issue, had this problem, and have to overcome it. Yeah. And Mark, you asked if this is the urban legend. No, I'm sure like most of those stories are actually real. Yeah, and most of those stories happened. Yeah. But this is this, let's say, complexity thing. Yeah. Okay, we can monitor the resources. It's cool, but at the same time, usually the monitoring works like it has some threshold. So if we, for some reason, and there can be those situations, we burn or use resources very fast, then we are going to be noticed, not before it happened, but we already have a huge bill. Some of the providers I know have this feature, let's say, like you are cut off immediately after you reach a specific, let's say, budget level, but some don't. And this might be crucial. But one thing all of them have, and this is probably important for newcomers, for cloud newcomers, is that if you contact a support, usually there is this, let's say, one-time thing that you can use. It's this, hey, I'm new and I did a stupid mistake, and can you like reduce this bill, or even remove it altogether or cancel it altogether? And it's possible to do so. And I know people, I was using that. so I know it's possible.
Yep. Wojtek, anything to add?
Yes, absolutely. It's worth to mention that the post-mortem analysis is not a really good approach here. When designing some solution, I think it's must have to think about the costs of the solution. And it is, in my opinion, when designing cloud applications, it is the most common mistake, probably, when you don't think about the costs of your solution. Especially when it comes to some not very often used services, because when you design the next application on serverless, for example, using S3, Lambdas, DynamoDB, and so on, you can predict the costs very good when it is the next solution. But when it comes to some services like SageMaker, for example, or streaming video to the cloud, or I don't know, CDN in some cases, CloudFront, it is very crucial to calculate the cost, predict the workload, and calculate if it is profitable to your business. Because on the end of the day, you have to earn money from your infrastructure, and you should not pay the AWS bill just because, and
You shouldn't
don't
pay more than you earn. That's the
yes,
first
yes,
rule.
it is. Yeah, it sounds like a cliche, but it's true, and it's very often omitted, in my opinion. And when building applications and solutions, especially in the environment when you manage a lot of them, you have to separate them by, for example, tags in AWS or AWS accounts. So it is very crucial to distinguish the costs of your infrastructure per product in the product or project, context. Yeah.
So one thing you guys says is like, okay, we have to think about the cloud, like very early stage, how to about the solution, how to architect it, how to design it. Yeah. But, from my point of view, if I'm, let's say, a new company, I don't have this expertise basically. Yeah. So for example, like we said that, okay, some services are simple and to calculate the cost is relatively easy, and it's true, yeah, because we have services that are charge hourly based, yeah, like EC2, so it's easy to calculate how much it will, take. Unless we have auto scaling, then it's a little bit harder, yeah, because there can be the unpredictable spikes just in case, yeah. But the more things we add, even in those simple services, a good example, if you have a EC2, yeah, the normal virtual machine basically, and you have it in a private network, so it don't have the direct access to the internet, and then you add additional, let's say, gateway, so it can connect to the internet. You have to be aware that you pay for the transfer through that gateway. And so if you have the S3, the most popular storage for the data, if it's going through the NAT gateway, so through this magic thing, you are actually going to pay a lot if you are using this way. And this is quite common example on the internet, how companies burned a lot of money because they were unaware that in order to make it fix, you need to know something like VPC endpoints, yeah, to actually use the internal private like line communication, direct line to the S3, so you won't be charged at all for this traffic. And this is where I see, this complexity, yeah, because most of the people probably are unaware of that. The more advanced users, the developers probably are, architects are for sure, yeah. And this is what Ruben, you said at the beginning, like we have we started to see those different roles showing up of people that actually, have this knowledge, okay, based on my experience, based on all of the white papers I read, all of the articles, trainings I had, I know that we need to do this, and you need to do this too, because otherwise your bill will skyrocket in like 2 months for sure. Yeah.
Yep. There was a question for Ruben on the chat. Probably because you're from a fintech. The question is, are you using cloud infrastructure for payment infrastructure, and what are the pros and cons of that?
Yes. I was I was still having my eyes on the question. It went away, but yes, we do use actually only cloud infrastructure. I've only been building clouds for the last 5, 6, 7 years. For the different fintechs I've been working with. What I see, but also basically all those companies were starting from basically, a new product, right? So greenfield, trying to get something out there, which meant that, transaction volumes are very much, random in terms of pattern. When does it have a footprint on my infrastructure and so on? And for me, up to now, in terms of architecture, that fitted best with managed services, serverless, step functions, these kind of things, in order to support this kind of thing. So a very event-driven architecture infrastructure, and that allowed basically keep my costs extremely low, while being able to respond to, for instance, high peaks in payments at some moment of the day, or large amount of payouts, or in a previous company, the same on issuing loans, for instance. The patterns there we didn't know yet, so trying to tailor that against instances that we would keep running in terms of pricing was completely out of balance. So we made a very clear choice, and then it added something else. It adds that basically in terms of architecture choices for the company, that huge forest of complexity of services, I could cut through the middle, or even in a smaller bit, and go, well, you know what, all these things we're not interested, so let's forget. We don't have to learn about them right now. We'll figure out if we ever need it. But for now, there's this list of, let's say, 5 services that you use in your day-to-day, plus 5 others that might be relevant to some extent, that some of the developers and the teams need to understand. And that's it. Out of thousands of services, I'm back to 10. I can build something that works, I'm sure, that is stable, that is resilient, that is operationally excellent, in cost, has 0 footprint for most of the time, and a little bit at some time. And now it fits in the head of everybody, right? Now, every time we need to build a new feature, we don't have 1,000 services to combine and to think about, but we have a few building blocks for which we already have templates, we already have cost control in place, these kind of things. And we go, okay, let's try to build it with this. It might not be the best out of the best, but it's damn good for now. And by the way, we can keep running, we can keep moving. We don't get as much distracted. So yeah, there are different dimensions in that, right? Does it serve the product we're trying to build? But also, can I build teams? Can I have people that build something excellent on that without slowing down, without being distracted, without creating risks? Because every time I take a new service that I haven't touched before into what we build, there are plenty of things we haven't figured out. Oh, shoot, there's a limit there I didn't expect. It's not going to work. We need to pivot. I lose time. I might have created a faulty product. I need to go back to the drawing table. So that's where basically that choice for me, at least, and that's very personal as an architect and as a technology leader, comes in. Can I make it simpler? Can I make it smaller? Can we keep running at a great quality?
Yep. Thank you. Okay. There are other questions, but maybe we'll answer them if we have time. Because I wanted also to talk with you about the people. Adam mentioned that the people are important, the people that learned what it's there. Also, Wojtek mentioned the DevOps kind of thing. The funny thing in this Flexera report is that previously I showed you this one, which is the initiatives that the organization have. And if you could ask a question slightly different, what are the top challenges that you have? The answers are that the first place is security, which we will talk if we have time in a couple of minutes. But the second one is lack of resource and expertise in people, which is kind of interesting, because there are plenty of developers, but are there the developers? I mean, is this the same? What actually you need to be the cloud developer, if there's even something like a cloud developer, or if this is a developer, or this is or you need other roles? We talked about the DevOps. By the way, I think that we have a pool for that, because there is still this discussion about if DevOps is a person that does DevOps stuff, or the DevOps is a culture. So I just have to connect with my green room to start the survey. So meantime, we will discuss, but you can fill in the survey if you want. I will show you the results later on. But basically, going back to the people. So what kind of skills you need to operate in the cloud, Wojtek? And do you need special roles for that?
The most important thing is willingness to learn new things, actually. Because in the traditional development, you have some kind of task for example, and you have to code your language, for example, C# or Python or so on, some functionality in the code base in the repository, and don't think so much about the infrastructure and integrations, how to deploy that and so on. But when it comes to cloud applications, the cloud native applications built on serverless, for example, on Lambdas, you have to think about it. And at this point, I cannot imagine that you can develop the application in the cloud in the modern way, serverless way, without the knowledge about the cloud and without the knowledge about the deploying the application in the cloud. Actually, there are some frameworks like local stack, for example, to test locally our solutions. We can also use serverless application model, for example, in the AWS to invoke Lambdas locally. But I think it is not a good approach. And as a developer, you have to have a knowledge about deploying the application to the cloud to test it, for the development purpose. The most important thing is willingness to just learn things about the cloud development, cloud deployments, and so on. And you cannot, there are plenty technologies, plenty frameworks to build applications in the cloud. Yeah, so you cannot just close to your language of choice, like C# or something else. You have to learn YAML, for example, or you know, Terraform or CDK or CloudFormation.
Yeah.
So you have to develop your skills in some other direction than before.
So I had this thought that people talk a lot about migrating software to the cloud, but actually I see that we also have to migrate people to the cloud. So this is also a process. What do you think, Adam? How long does it take to migrate a developer to the cloud developer?
So I would say it's actually easier to not to migrate, but to have someone who starts with the cloud directly. I mean, this is the easiest thing, yeah, because but it's obviously it's not always possible. Yeah, the fact is the development in the cloud is somehow different. Yeah, so we were used to develop everything locally. Like we could, just as Wojtek said, we could test everything there. Nowadays, the direction all of the tools takes, for example, SAM, the serverless application model, actually has this feature of live reloading. So basically, you know, you are able to develop something on your machine, and it's like in real time, it's synced with the AWS environment, so you can just click and see the same, like, you know, the on the front end usually, yeah. And so it actually requires some time for people to switch from this mindset of, yeah, I'll be able to test everything here in my machine versus, okay, I have to deploy it. I have to like have it available, tested on the cloud environment. Then we have also this part of the, okay, so far I only cared about code itself. Maybe I did some local Docker compose. Yeah, that was probably the, let's say, where this line between the so-called DevOpses and developers, you know, was drawn. And nowadays it's more like, okay, I actually have to do more, a little bit more. When we develop serverless applications, usually the developers are responsible for at least some part of the infrastructure. When we develop something in the cloud, we have to learn either any kind of infrastructure as code to actually be proficient. Yeah? It can be Terraform, it can be Pulumi, it can be anything, any tool that will, by the end, will help us to deliver faster. And this is basically the DevOps culture. Yeah, so like it's not the person, it's not the position role, it's the let's say the mindset of the whole organization, whole team. So I would say it's possible. It's really possible to migrate the whole team, the whole mindset in a year. And this is by our experience, but it requires a very detailed plan. Yeah, like what things have to be learned, and it requires you to have all of the required resources, materials to cover those areas. Yeah, you have to have a plan. Okay, how we are going to learn Terraform, how we are going to learn those specific services, because I totally agree with Ruben that you have to narrow down this list of this forest to only a few trees that, okay, those are the trees we are going to care about. Yeah, and the rest, I know they are there, let's leave them for now. But those are the things we are going to focus on, and slowly starting to teach people, teach the whole organization about it, how to use it well, how to use it properly, and master them, and only then move to the next thing. Yeah. So yeah, this is, I would say this is the approach I see currently, and I see a lot of organizations are actually going through this process. Yeah, nowadays.
Yep. Yeah. So the survey results are overwhelming as well. So most of you think that this is a culture. Yeah, I agree. Wojtek probably agrees as well.
Yes, just one thing that I can refer to the Adam's answer, because we have the similar experience with migrating teams to the cloud with our workloads. And in my opinion, on the other hand, is the crucial thing in this process is to have a strong technical leader, which has an experience and knowledge about the cloud. And it is the half of the success for me. When you have the strong leader who knows about the architecture, cloud development, you can teach a team very easily for me.
It's funny because both of your answers really looked at, let's say, how do I get an engineering team to be comfortable in the cloud? But actually, for me at least, it's even wider than that. Is how do I get a whole organization to be comfortable in the cloud? I remember, and I see in the list of
there is a question, so we can answer this question from Sandeep right now.
Yeah, so yeah, what I was going to say is actually I see in the list of entities a former colleague of mine that was basically my compliance counterpart. Okay. And I know back then also having conversations on, hey, by the way, how can I bring you into this world that I'm creating, right? I'm creating a cloud world for this bank. Now, how do I make sure that not only you're comfortable, but you're also self-sufficient now in there? How can I create those tools where basically questions about security, compliance are already answered, but understandable in this new world? How do I bring a finance team into this new world as well? Before they would just get an invoice from wherever I rented my server racks. But I want them to understand to a more detailed level now what's happening in there so that they can anticipate, participate in that cloud adoption. So suddenly I'm talking about having a whole learning plan for the whole organization where developers need to start understanding, well, we're going to do serverless, start learning serverless. But on the other side, what is compliance in the cloud? What is the shared responsibility model? How does that work? How does it impact us? And now that is not only developers anymore. And I'm talking to my security team, I'm talking to my compliance team, cost control, finance team, and so on and so on. So there's a whole organization that then can start learning. We create learning plans together with the cloud provider, with that strong technical leader that can already have an opinion on that. And now I start transitioning that whole organization to be comfortable in the cloud. And that can still happen within that same year that you transition your developers. I completely agree with that. There is also something else, because we're talking DevOps. And when we're talking DevOps, of course, well, I prefer to call them cloud engineers because, well, you know what? I need a different name, so I pick one. It's not the best one. But anyway, that group of people suddenly get a different role as well. What their role is to create a safe environment for developers to evolve in and to take ownership of the cloud. So those 10 services I mentioned, plus a few. Now the plus a few possibly might be my cloud engineers that say, hey, by the way, don't worry, I'll make sure that everything you create is properly backed up in an offsite place. I don't want a developer to forget about that because it might actually imply I lose my license. Talking about compliance again. So backing up in a remote region, in a remote account might be a hard requirement to keep my license. Well, if that's the case, then I like to have somebody that goes, you know what, don't worry. If you use this tool, by definition, your database will always be fine, always replicated. And then we're talking about those few additional services that might be only known to a few in the organization, but make now a playground for developers where they can create great services with more limited knowledge of basically the whole cloud, but still create the best solution ever and fulfill all, well, external obligations. So that's where basically those two crafts then come together, right? I create a safe, well, playground. It's not a playground, it's for real, it's production, but a safe playground for people to evolve in. They can create amazing things. They need to learn infrastructure as code, build their own database, deploy their own database, migrate their own database if needed. That's on you, developer, now, which is a massive step.
Yep.
Do it safely. I will guarantee that. Now I have a cloud engineer that will just go, that's easy. I got this.
Yep. So I heard like there's a new buzzword called cloud ops. So there is no DevOps right now, but the cloud ops. So and I also heard FinOps and DevSecOps and lots of opses. So do you think this is required?
DevSecOps is my favorite. Actually.
Required. You call it however you want. In the end, there's, I think, a responsibility for different participants. Now, if I train my finance team to feel more comfortable in my cloud, I can call them FinOps, or I just still call them finance, and they just have an additional skill on their quiver of arrows there, right? So, I haven't, let's say, grown yet to calling everything ops, because at some point, well, we wanted to call developers engineers. Everybody was an engineer. That's fine. I mean, it represents a thinking about the role of a person. Everybody now that touches the cloud through their own different roles gets the label ops. Again, that's fine. It's not a requirement, let's say, to be performing. I think the requirement is the knowledge that you impart to people. It's that curiosity. And by the way, I really love. You start the answer with curiosity. That's the answer to most problems, right? So Wojciech, it's curiosity. If everybody's curious, we're good.
Yep.
Yes, I think you can label those, for example, cloud ops and FinOps roles in the organization, but it's not the position for sure. We don't have to have a FinOps position in our company, but every cloud engineer acts like a FinOps sometimes, I would say.
Yeah, so I totally agree. It's not about the label, it's rather about the set of skills that you have to have in your organization. Yeah, you have to somehow fill this, this gap of, understanding of the cloud costs and being able to predict something. You have to fill this gap of the security. And just as the Ruben, you said, like basically those positions kind of shifted a little bit. Yeah, like developers were used to something else, and nowadays they had to adapt to completely new environment. Yeah, and the, let's say, previous DevOpses, like how we were used to call them, actually do something completely different nowadays. Yeah, and it's going to change. The cloud, from my perspective, is actually the very good step for, because it also increased the productivity, the development speed. Yeah, if the developers are able to build something in a safe environment, as you said, they can take the responsibility. They can be more flexible, agile. They can make decisions easier, and just in case switch those things faster. Yeah, we don't need to create a ticket for someone else to pick it up and a week later it will be done. No, we just decide, okay, this has to be done now, so we are doing that, and you are responsible for that. Cool, I'm doing that. I know how to do. I feel safe. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
But, as Sandeep wrote on the chat, so the FinOps thing seems like for a big companies an easy solution to have a person accountable, because this is probably what you're looking for, if you have a big organization and you have a cost concern, and you say to your CTO or whatever, like, hey, can you please make sure that we have it covered? And then the most natural response is, yes, sir, we'll have a dedicated person just for that. But is it the best way to go, or like, should all developers be aware of the costs and actually be accountable for example, creating their serverless Lambda that will cause some trouble? Ruben?
This comes down, so accountability comes down to ownership, right? I don't like being accountable for things I don't own. So the question is, what is owned by whom? For me, if for instance the former DevOps, the Cloud Ops, whatever call it, right, team is the one that sees costs, budget monitors, cost alerts, these kind of things, and the ones creating actually the services don't. The ones creating it cannot be held accountable because they don't feel responsible. They don't have that feedback. So now, at least the way I like to operate is, so, well, you know, this team is responsible for the microservices they create. These are your microservices, you deploy them, you make sure they run on production, they don't break. If they break, you wake up. This is you own this. That means the cost component is also in there. So now what do we have? I deploy a service, it's tagged, that tag rolls up into a cost, that cost is a monitor, and that monitor is owned by the team. Not the individual developer, but the team. And it becomes part of the conversation. If I have a spike in cost on a certain microservice, that means a spike in cost for that team. And now that team needs to figure out whether to prioritize a new feature or to prioritize cost control. But that excessive cost is on them. And that's an adult conversation to have together. Does it make sense to make something cheaper, or does it make sense to create a feature that will get us more customers? And everybody can feel that, can understand that from the moment that feedback loop is completely integrated back to the one that creates, that owns. So making sure something is secure, cost effective, all those elements, those non-functionals in the end, are to the ones that create, because then I learn to create also an architecture that is cost effective. I make a choice. And I have had, in honesty, developers make a very conscious choice, which I appreciated, to take a resource that was more expensive. And they went, now I'm going to make it more difficult for you. I'm going to factor in my salary. If I deploy this in DynamoDB, fucking cheap, it's awesome. But I will have to do 3 migrations of data in DynamoDB. Now that's going to take me a week every time, because data migration in DynamoDB is not the best. Let's agree on that. So you know what? I'm going to actually pull out an RDS, because with that, I know that every time business will change their mind about how I need to access that data, I will be able to change it in a day. And my salary for now is so much higher, my effort is so much higher, that I know I'm making a choice on cost that integrates the cost of the infrastructure, but also the cost of the developer or the developers involved. And I understand that as a developer. Now, I don't like paying more for my infrastructure, but actually the developer makes a choice for me. That makes sense. I cannot go against that principle, because I also, well, in the end, pay for everything IT here, and I know exactly what they mean. That choice can only be done if you have an understanding of all the components.
Yeah, so you have to be like a multi-tool here, basically.
And it's for us to make sure that everybody gets that learning, gets that information, but gets also access to the tools, the teachings, the material with the cloud provider, the trainings, and so on to do that. I cannot expect a developer to give me that answer if I didn't teach him first, hey, by the way, this is how cost works in cloud. So training is on me. I need to make sure that they get to that level before I start hammering them, say, you're creating shit solutions that cost a lot of money. So that's on me.
Yeah, and basically we are back to this role of the leader with the who understands the cloud, who knows how to let's say build stuff in the cloud. Yeah, because this is the role of such person, to, you know, such person, or like as you said, training for those developers to understand, to learn, okay, or rather understand the decision, yeah, why we will go with the RDS instead of the DynamoDB in this case, because in the other case it will be opposite, yeah. And for them it might be like, what? But week ago we've built something similar. Yeah, and now you say that the Dynamo here is fine, and a week ago you said it's not fine. So how it is?
Exactly. Okay, we are running out of time. We have 5 minutes and we have some questions. So maybe let's try to answer them. I think we answered this first one a little bit. It's from Sandeep. It's what's your view on Tom? And how business, this is how I read this question. Maybe you guys can answer this, is how the whole business changes when adopting the cloud, right? So I think that we have answered this a little bit, right? I can add that there is something called Conway's law. So Conway's law basically is about that the software architecture and how software works somehow reflects how the company works, right? So if you have a mess in your code, you probably have a mess in your organization. But that means that also if you have a code in the cloud, you somehow work more as a cloud. What do you think, Ruben?
No, I think here, at least for me, when I read this question, there's one thing that screams in the back of my head, and that is if you move something from let's say traditional to cloud, if you think you can do that just by lifting and shifting, and you're going to pay more. It's not going to be working the way you want, because basically you got in cloud, cool, that possibly a shareholder, an investor, whatever, might be happy with you because you can say cloud, but your bill will be higher because you didn't benefit from anything from cloud. You only could took the cost. That applies to teams as well. So if you have a team that's used to working on premise and you move it to cloud and don't change its structure, don't change its learning, don't change its development, don't change its targets, don't change its priorities, it's the same. You get the cost without the benefit, and basically it's a lose-lose-lose. So keep both in mind. Transitioning to cloud is transitioning people, transitioning code, architectures, everything, and you need to rethink everything. It doesn't mean you need to do it right away, right? Being in cloud and then changing from cloud to cloud might be a way to get there. There are multiple ways to get there. But if your end station is basically, I have the same crap and I have the same people who are doing that, but now I call it cloud, don't. Stay away from that. Change everything. Think about your people. Think about your code, your infrastructure, everything. Review that. Improve. Not in one go. Iterate, and you will get actually amazing at cloud. Get all the benefits.
Yeah. So yeah, migrating from cloud from AWS to AWS is also possible with AWS. We are now talking with them about certain partnerships and the funding for migrating to the cloud. And actually, AWS treats migrating from their AWS to even bigger AWS as a migration. Yeah. Okay. The second one, not sure if we have an expertise enough, but maybe you have, about how do we optimize the real-time streaming services on the AWS?
It very depends on specific cases and specific services, actually. But what can I say is how to optimize the real-time streaming at all is just use the streaming services. Because, for example, when we have some need to stream data from, for example, S3 bucket, some very, very large chunks of data, it is worth to use services like Kinesis to buffer the calls to the S3 API, for example. So when you have the requirement to stream a lot of data, you should take a look at the streaming services. So it is just an advice.
Yep, thank you. And the last one is about IAC. Any tools you can recommend, any practices you can recommend?
So I can say one thing for sure, that if your goal is multi-cloud, you cannot go with AWS CDK and CloudFormation. But for sure, Terraform is currently the most popular. And also I think in the beta, there is the CDK. So basically you can code in like any language. Yeah, so it might be easier for developers. I wouldn't say it's, let's say, production ready yet, but it probably will be a good choice at some point. The other tool that is not on this list is Pulumi, and this is also, as far as I know, it works on any cloud. So you can use Pulumi and Terraform for any provider, just in case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Be mindful of why you want to do multi-cloud. That's just a general warning here. It often is not what you think.
And multi-cloud, yeah, this is yet another topic, a multi-cloud or a hybrid cloud, because I see that most of people are now in the hybrid cloud. So they have a classic on-premise, let's call it this way, and the cloud, and also about the security and cost optimization. Yeah, multi-cloud or hybrid cloud is even more complex. But it's good that you, Adam, answered this last question, because actually Adam volunteered before the call. Nice picture, isn't it?
Energetic, dynamic.
So Adam volunteered that you can drop them a line saying cloud consultation on his email, and the best inquiries, we can even set up some call with Adam if you have some nice topic to discuss. We can work on that. So if you have a nice inquiry and or a nice thing to discuss after this webinar, please do. And thank you very much. We are 1 minute after the time, so I failed my my timekeeping a little bit. But thank you so much for a very interesting discussion. This is actually the last questions. Thank you for the interesting discussion. So yes, thank you as well for joining us today, and see you on the next CTO Roundtables. Bye.
Thank you very much.